Hello, we're going to demonstrate a class 1 amalgam restoration now. We had just finished the class 5 amalgam restoration on the same tooth, and I am going to start off by observing the prep. So I'm going to look at the prep really well, make sure that all looks good there. I'm going to try in my condenser to make sure it fits into all of the prepared areas. And that seems pretty good. Make sure you have everything set up. You would put your 2 layers of varnish in there, drying in between lightly, and after the second application of varnish. And I'm going to go ahead and mix up my amalgam. When you're mixing up your amalgam, make sure that you're paying attention to the manufacturer's instructions. It'll let you know basically for that particular kind of amalgam that you're using how long you are supposed to triturate it. But depending on your amalgamators, the time will vary, so you may have to adjust it somewhat. Okay, so I'm going to pack both ends of my barrier. I'll apply the small end to the floor. And condense that in there. I don't know why it seems hard. To see if this is going to be okay, even though a little bit came out. Let me see, I'm going to put some air in there and some suction. Wonder if that was amalgam from before or something. Let me see. Yeah, probably was. That's an oopsie. Right. There we go. That's more like it. Condense that in there. So first you want to condense straight up and down, overlapping condensation, and then kind of can push into the side walls to make sure that you're not leaving any voids anywhere in there. And then go ahead and put your next layer in there. I'm going to use the small condenser again to make sure I get everything in there really well. You can use the side of your condenser when you're trying to condense into the lingual groove or the buccal groove. If you keep condensing and you're pushing your amalgam out, then you must be condensing and pushing, like in sliding or something. So you don't want to do that. You want to condense straight up and down. I'm going to put another layer. Remember, you need to overfill. And why are you overfilling? Because we need the mercury to rise to the top, because that's going to be the weak. Tin mercury is the weak phase in this material. So condense it really well all around the margins. And then I'm going to go ahead and put another layer. And this will probably be my last layer. When you're pushing, push down and move the amalgam carrier as you're doing it. Fill it, from one side to the next. You should hear the material kind of squeaking. Pack. I think they say it's supposed to be like 7 to 10 pounds per pressure whenever you're condensing. And whenever you're condensing, you should have one of those little metal brackets on your pole so that your mandibular arch isn't going and springing up and down every time. Okay, so it's nice and condensed. I'm going to go ahead and go to my ball burnisher now. Let me get my suction. So use the rounded part and go from your buckle groove and go straight across to your lingual and put some pressure in there. And then here's where your mesial fossa would be, and go up and over all of the cava surface margins. And then here's where your distal fossa would be, and really push that in there. Go up and over all of your margins. Okay, so then you're left with 3 fossas: mesial, central, distal. Okay? You want to burnish over top of where these transverse ridges were left now. Burnish very lightly over that to make sure that you're sealing that margin. Okay. Now, if you work quickly enough, you can take your acorn and you can sink your acorn, into the fossa areas, and then you can tip it slightly and pull out. Tip it slightly to the burnishing side and then pull out. So this way you're not going to just leave this little pinpoint depression. You put that in there, wiggle, tip and slide out. Do the same thing. Don't tip it toward, like the point of the acorn, don't put that toward your wall, because you'll ditch it. You always just want to tip it towards the burnishing side, okay? And don't put the point towards any of your walls. When you go to put this in, you want it to be right in the center of that fossa, and you don't want it to go towards your walls at all, okay? Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and carve, and you have to determine whether you need the small carver or the large carver for this. So you can see the transverse ridge. So what you have to do is you have to adapt your instrument. You're coming from the lingual groove, and you're going to adapt this instrument and very, very lightly go over your transverse ridge. So I just did this right here just to show you. I'm still keeping that ridge there, and this is adapted right here, okay? So then I want to go from that ridge and stop right in the middle of the fossa that I put there. So it's the smallest little movement, okay? So I'm making a triangle. I'm going here to here. I didn't go past the middle of my prep. So now I'm going to focus on the distal lingual cusp. I'm going from my fossa, okay, up to the middle of my transverse, okay, and now I'm coming. You have to change your angle, sometimes move behind the patient's head a little bit in order to get the angle correct. But now I'm going to carve the side of the cavo surface margin here of that triangle. Make sure that that's flush. Okay, so let's see what we have so far. All right, so far I have, pretty good adaptation and of my triangles and stuff. So now I got to work on the buckles. Okay, so again, I need to change my angle. I'm going to make sure that I'm coming from the fossa, not the distal wall, because if you start there, you're going to ditch your margin. I want to make sure that my point of my cleoid does not go farther than the middle of my prep. My instrument is adapted to the tooth and the filling right now, and I'm stopping right where that height of contour, or not the height of contour, the transverse ridge would be. Okay, so because I'm at this angle, I'm going to go ahead and start the mesial buckle. I'm going to go from this buckle groove, and I'm going to focus on carving this side of the triangular ridge. Okay. Okay, so then I have to adjust, see if I can do this with this camera in my way. My instrument wants to be where the camera is. So I'm going to go from the middle of my triangular ridge and carve to the buckle groove. Again, keeping my instrument point no further than the middle of this filling. Okay? Make sure that you carve in there. You want to make sure that you're applying pressure, and you can keep going over and over and over a certain area until you get the depth that you want. Okay, so let's see if I can get the right angle here to get the side of this triangle. And again, I got to stop short so that I don't ditch anything out here. You don't want to be left with this extra amalgam in the center. So whatever you do, that should be your deepest area. That should be your central fossa. So you have to go back in and make sure that you remove that little bit of amalgam if it's left over there. So just keep enhancing what you put in there. So that's why it's so important for you to know the anatomy, to know what you're supposed to be putting in there. You gotta, watch a lot of videos and kind of have a plan, have an idea of what you're supposed to do. So, as far as the distal fossas, I want to use my smaller discoid cleoid, and I want to make sure that I adapt it so that it will be on filling and tooth, so that I don't ditch that out. But you want to make sure that that's nice and smooth around the cavo surface margin there. And then I'm going to do the same thing here. Notice the different angles that I'm using. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and rinse this real quick. Okay, so you should be able to see all the different angles. You can see, you know, a central groove. You can see the fossas here. Buccal groove going down, lingual groove, transverse. Okay, so if you don't have depth when you're carving your fossas, you're going to hit whenever you check your occlusion. So right now, before I burnish it, I'm going to check my occlusion. First thing I'm going to do is just lightly close my Tipidont together, and I don't see any marks, so I'm going to tap, 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 and look. The only thing I see is right on that mesial marginal ridge, so that could be a little bit of material left there. I'm just going to go over that real quick to make sure there's no material. Now with these Tipidont teeth, you can ditch that, so you got to be careful. You can actually carve away your plastic. So don't do that. Okay, so still no mark. I'm going to tap and move the jaw excursively and protrusively to see if there's any markings. Now I do see a little bit of a blue mark. Do you see it on this one transverse ridge? Right here I see a little bit, so I'm going to just kind of take that down just a little tiny bit, and then I'll check the occlusion again. Before you do that, give it a rinse so you're not checking it when there's still material left on the tooth. Okay. Check it one more time. And it's good. All right, so the last thing you want to do is just burnish it up. So when you're burnishing it, make sure that you go up and over your anatomy to enhance everything that you already put in there. Burnish your cavo surface margins. Don't just go straight across. If you need to use, you know, the point of the football, that's fine, you know, to go in your grooves and things like that. Okay? And then you want to wipe off your marks and then have me come and check it. Okay? Good luck.